The Arizona dawn shattered with the screech of tires on gravel, a plume of dust clawing at the sky. Two black SUVs tore onto the private property, their doors emblazoned with fake insignias that glinted under the rising sun. Men spilled out, clad in tactical vests that screamed authority but bore no legitimate markings. They moved with rehearsed aggression, barking orders, while VYing clipboards stuffed with forged documents. Their voices cut through the desert stillness, demanding compliance, threatening fines. They thought they were in control. They had no idea they'd just stormed into the heart of a live tactical training ground, where the men and women waiting weren't just trainees, they were predators honed by years of war and law enforcement. Within moments, the imposters would face a reckoning that would unravel their scheme and expose a conspiracy far darker than anyone could have imagined. Miles Connor, 40, stood on the porch of his sprawling Redstone Ranch, a 5-acre fortress carved out of the Tucson desert. A former SWAT commander turned private instructor, Miles had built this place as a sanctuary for those who live by discipline and skill. His gray eyes, sharp as flint, scanned the horizon as he sipped his coffee, the bitter tang grounding him. The ranch was more than a home. It was a pro-VYing ground. Signs studded the perimeter, private property, tactical training in progress. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Inside, a dozen trainees, retired Marines, ex-cops, private contractors moved through drills with the precision of a symphony. Miles watched them, pride flickering in his chest. These weren't hobbyists. They were warriors keeping their edge razor-sharp. The rumble of engines snapped his attention to the driveway. Two SUVs, magnetic stickers slapped on their sides reading Regional Compliance Task Force, rolled to a stop. Miles's gut tightened. His neighborhood had no HOA, and no government agency called itself a task force with such vague flair. 4 men emerged, 2 in tactical vests that looked like they'd been ordered off a shady website, the others in plain clothes but carrying radios and clipboards. The leader, a wiry man with a buzz cut and a VY-8er sunglasses, strode forward, his posture screaming overconfidence. "We're here about VY-olations," he barked, while VYing a sheaf of papers. "Noise complaints. Unauthorized structures. Step aside, homeowner." Miles set his coffee down, his movements deliberate. "And you are?" he asked, voice low but laced with steel. "Regional Compliance Task Force," the man snapped. "State authority. We're inspecting your property." Now, Miles's eyes narrowed. There was no such agency. He'd spent 2 decades in law enforcement. He knew the playbook. These men weren't officials, they were predators. "This is private property," he said, stepping forward. "You're trespassing. Leave." The buzz-cut man smirked, undeterred. "You don't want trouble, pal. We've got jurisdiction." He nodded to his partner, a stocky guy with a fake badge clipped to his vest, who started toward the training yard. The other 2 fanned out, one snapping photos of the obstacle course, the other testing the lock on the equipment shed. Miles's trainees paused their drills, their gazes locking onto the intruders like hawks spotting prey. Miles reached for his phone, his voice calm as he dialed the Pima County Sheriff's Department. "This is Miles Connor at Redstone Ranch. I've got 4 men impersonating officials, trespassing, and interfering with a live training exercise." Before the dispatcher could respond, a shout erupted from a yard. The stocky intruder had grabbed a trainee's gear bag, rifling through it like he owned the place. The trainees closed in, their movements fluid, controlled. These were men and women who'd faced real threats: insurgents, cartels, active shooters. They didn't flinch. "Put it down," snapped Sarah Vega, a former Marine with a voice that could cut glass. Her stance was coiled, ready to strike. Another trainee, a retired highway patrol officer named Greg Holt, stepped forward. "You've got no authority here." The buzz-cut man pulled a taser from his belt, his smirk on. "Back off, or you're all getting cited for obstruction." Miles was done. He stepped between them, his presence a wall. "You're endangering lives and obstructing a lawful operation. Last chance, sleeve." The man laughed, a hollow sound. "You think you're some big-shot trainer? This is our turf now." That was when the desert itself seemed to respond. A low rumble grew louder, and 3 black SUVs roared onto the property, kicking up clouds of dust. These weren't imposters. These were the real Deal Pima County Tactical Response Unit, led by Miles's old SWAT partner, Captain Derek Walsh. The vehicles skidded to a halt, and 8 officers in full gear poured out, rifles at the ready, eyes scanning the scene with lethal focus. Walsh, a bear of a man with a graying beard and a voice like gravel, stepped forward. "Miles," he said, his tone clipped. "You called in a red flag. This better be good." Miles pointed at the intruders, who now looked like deer caught in a spotlight. "They're impersonating officials. Forced their way in, threatened my trainees, and one's while VYing a taser." Walsh gave a single nod, and his team moved like a machine. 2 officers flanked left, 2 right, 2 approached the suspects, and 2 held over watch. "Hands up," one shouted. "On the ground now." The buzz-cut man hesitated, his eyes darting. Then he bolted, sprinting toward the shed. Sarah Vega was faster. With a burst of speed, she tackled him into the dirt, his taser skittering across the ground. The stocky man dropped to his knees, hands trembling. "It's a misunderstanding," he stammered. "We're contractors. We were hired." The other 2 froze, their clipboards falling like discarded props. Walsh's team cuffed them with the efficiency of a pit crew. Miles crouched beside the buzz-cut man, now panting and pale. "You thought you could waltz in here with fake badges and scare people into submission," he said, his voice a low growl. "You picked the wrong yard." Walsh approached, holding a pouch pulled from one of the SUVs. Inside were stacks of forged document citations, fee notices, HOA letterheads alongside prepaid debit cards loaded with cash. "This isn't just a scam," Walsh said grimly. "It's organized extortion. They've been hitting rural homes, targeting people who don't know their rights." Miles stood, his jaw tight. They didn't just target a home. They walked into a war game. As the imposters were loaded into the SUVs, Sarah muttered, "I can't believe they thought they'd get away with it." "They didn't think," Miles replied. "They were desperate. And desperation with a fake badge is a recipe for chaos." Walsh clapped Miles on the shoulder. "You've done more than you know. We've been chasing this crew for months." Their names matched complaints from retirees across the county. Miles nodded, but his mind was already racing. This wasn't just a one-off. The sophistication of the documents, the prepaid card sit pointed to something bigger. He looked at his trainees, their faces a mix of adrenaline and disbelief. They'd handled the threat, but the real fight was just beginning. By the next morning, the story was everywhere. "Fake task force busted by ex-SWAT trainer in desert standoff" screamed headlines across Arizona, then the nation. The irony was irresistible. A gang of fraudsters posing as law enforcement had stumbled into the private training ground of a man who'd spent his life teaching the real thing. But for Miles, the headlines were noise. What mattered were the calls flooding in neighbors, veterans, single parents, all with stories of unmarked SUVs, aggressive men in vests, and threats of fines for nonsense violations like improper fence height or unpermitted patio furniture. The sheriff's department confirmed the scam was part of a regional ring, a mix of ex-security guards, grifters, and tech hustlers buying fake IDs online. Their tactic was simple: target rural homes and areas with loose zoning, apply pressure, and collect payments from people too scared or confused to fight back. What set Miles apart was that he didn't pay. He didn't negotiate, and he had a small army at his back. That week, Miles hosted a town hall at the local community center, Know Your Rights, defending against fake authority. Over 300 people packed the room, their faces a mix of anger and fear. A nurse named Carla Ruiz stood up, her voice shaking as she described paying Dula $1,200 to avoid a lien after men threatened to seize her home over a non-compliant mailbox. A retired firefighter admitted he'd nearly drawn his gun when confronted in his garage. An elderly woman, tears in her eyes, said she'd been too ashamed to tell anyone. Con V. Wine said she'd broken some obscure law. Miles stood at the front. No uniform, no theatrics, just a man who'd seen too much to stay silent. "I've spent 20 years teaching people how to face threats," he said. "But this manipulation, This fear, it's a different kind of weapon. They don't break in with guns. They knock. They smile. They carry clipboards. And they make you think you're the one who's wrong. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. You're not. They are. The room erupted in applause, but Miles wasn't there for cheers. He was already rewriting his training program, adding modules on spotting forged credentials, de-escalating confrontations with imposters, and documenting encounters for legal action. Requests for his courses tripled, his quiet ranch now a hub of active VY. But something else stirred a proposal from two sheriff's deputies who'd responded that day. Both were veterans, both fed up with a system that reacted but rarely prevented. They wanted to partner with Miles on a CIVY Lien Defense Initiative, a program to arm communities with knowledge before scams reach their doorsteps. Miles agreed, not for glory, but because he saw the pattern. The system wasn't just flawed, it was being gamed. And good people were paying the price. Weeks later, the impostors identified as Kyle Brennan and Mark Tate faced a litany of charges: impersonation, fraud, extortion, criminal trespass, and more. Victims emerged from across southern Arizona, their stories painting a picture of a sprawling operation. Brennan and Tate took plea deals, but Miles insisted on testifying. This isn't about them, he told the courtroom, his voice steady. It's about every person who opened their door to a fake badge and felt powerless. Intimidation isn't law. A vest doesn't make you right. The judge listened, the room silent. Outside, a reporter asked Miles if he thought the fight was over. He gave a half smile. Scams evolve. So do we. We train harder, stay sharper, and never let our guard down. Back at Redstone Ranch, Miles watched a new group of trainee CIVY liens this time, not soldiers. A young couple learning to protect their homestead. A grandmother in cargo pants, determined to never be a VY Tim again. A teenager with his dad, both eager to stand tall. The dusty yard, once just a training ground, had become a symbol of resistance. Fear had no place here. Fake authority would find no foothold. And justice? It didn't just knock, it kicked the door down. If you were the one in this story, how would you react? Would you stand up and fight back, or accept the unreasonable pressure and control from the HOA? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this VY Deo with more people. Your small action gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more intense and engaging stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next VY Deo.